Hi, welcome to Dream Big. I'm Hannah Viviers. Thank you so much for joining us. Our guest today is financial expert Viv Govender. He's going to be speaking to us about a career change that he's recently made, moving away from economics and getting more into the education side of what's happening not only in South Africa's economy but around the world. Thank you so much for joining us, Viv.
Oh, thanks for having me, Hannah.
Viv, I want to get into why you wanted to change from where you were and what you were doing and moving more into the side of education.
Yeah, I think that, in terms of career choice, people always focus on, the money aspect of it, etc. But if you look at, your real life, you don't just look at money, you look at the other aspects of your life as well. And I believe there's more satisfaction, there's more, overall, contentment to be gotten from education as opposed to looking purely at financial matters or, just purely looking at the best investment return and at the lowest risk profile.
But what was it for you? What was it that you woke up one day and you were like, maybe I want to make a change?
Well, a small opportunity came along, and then I had been teaching in the past. Before I got into the financial sector, I was a lecturer at a number of different tertiary institutions. With regards to, for instance, I was at Technicons, I was at some universities in lecturing, and then I decided to move on to the financial sector, the stock market. And just a few opportunities came along, and it kind of reignited the passion I used to have before for education. It's much more enjoyable to just teach a class for a day as opposed to be looking at a bunch of financial statements for that same.
Who are you teaching, and what are you teaching them?
I noticed that there's a real demand in this country for financial education for adults. I'm not looking at high school or even varsity students, but more for young adults or even people further along in their careers. Everyone operates in the economy. Everyone functions in this modern economy. Not everyone knows how it works. They don't know the basic concepts, and therefore often you'll be an expert in your particular field but not understand how to basically translate the earnings you get from that particular field into actually making real term.
Are you talking now more about entrepreneurs? Because you did say to me that you do work with entrepreneurs. So, for instance, you gave the example of, for instance, a person will be a plumber, a really good plumber. They've been doing it for the past 20 years. Now they have their own business and they really battle to grow it into a business. They work more as in just do a small job, get paid for it day to day.
Yes, exactly. Not just that, however, but entrepreneurs are very important. Like you mentioned, many of the small and medium enterprises in this country are basic sustenance businesses. People get into a particular thing. They don't think of themselves as entrepreneurs. They have a business in which they operate themselves, they own the operation, but they don't think of themselves as business people. They think of themselves as, plumbers, like you mentioned, electricians, salespeople. And they don't understand how their business functions. And a basic financial education is necessary to get that business to the next level, to understand, this is my cash flow, this is my, my cost structure, this is where I make my profits. My profit centers come from this particular products. I should focus more on this as opposed to that. Instead, they look at themselves as being professionals in particular areas or, people that are doing particular kind of jobs. They may be working for themselves, but they're still doing a job. They are not a business person operating a business, and that's the kind of shift you can have. But at the same time, even with regards to employed individuals, often they'll be earning an income and they have a great deal of professional expertise in how to earn that income, but they don't understand how to save or invest that income to make themselves, financially secure or to achieve goals going forward. And you'll find many well-educated people often, with really strong, cash flows coming in from, good business, good jobs or even good businesses, having really precarious financial situations because they don't understand where the best opportunities are and what the best choices they should be making financially.
And also probably what I'm thinking now when you said that is even a person that has a job, they could have different kinds of investment and different streams of revenue coming in. Is that something that you would teach?
Yeah, that's true for everybody. In fact, think about it. Everyone is going to come to a point where they don't work anymore. And they're going to be living off the investments they made when they were younger, if you reach retirement age, of course. So at some point in time, we all are going to hopefully get to a point where you don't work anymore and your investment's going to have to work for you. You spend years learning how to do the job that earns you the money. But often you'll find that your investments will have to make you money for as long as your working life was. If you try at 60 and you live till 90, you have 30 years, of a period where the money that you've invested has to basically pay you an income.
You were saying to me the one time we were talking, and you were saying, Hannah, you don't understand compound interest and how a little bit of money that you're saving today could just go such a long way when you do retire. And I think that's something I have discussions with my friends and I have discussions with other people. And I think it's something that as individuals we don't think about so much, especially if you've got a job, because you're thinking, I've got my pension fund and when I retire, I'll use that. And I know people personally where they've gone and they've had to go look at that pension fund, and it's dismal compared to what they're earning right now. And then they realize, I'm not going to be able to actually afford to be able to retire. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the stats are shocking. Of people that have pension funds, those that have actually done the actual effort to actually get a pension fund or have some kind of retirement savings, not the vast majority of the country who have nothing. We talk about people that have professional that have pension funds. A mere 12% of them will have either 60% or above their last paycheck when they retire in terms of income. So let's just say you're making 50,000 rands a month. Only 12%, we're talking about 1/8 of those people will have at least 30,000 rands a month coming in when they retire. That is something that's very scary, and I think that's something that can be changed if you have a clear idea about how the financial system works. A good example would be, did you know that in real terms, the stock market has returned 7% above inflation for the last 100 years or so? That is a great return. That's more than enough to make you financially secure. The problem is the vast majority of investors get 1 or 2% above inflation. Why is that? There are a number of reasons, but the main reason is they don't understand how the system works. They don't understand what the difference is. And that 3 to 5% I'm talking about, that the difference between what you should be getting and what you actually are getting, 5% over a lifespan of investment will translate into not just a slight improvement in your retirement. We're talking about being 5 or 6 times wealthier when you retire.
You lost me with all those numbers. That was a lot of numbers, Viv. I don't think I understood a word you said just now. But I want to talk about some of the stuff that people like me can understand. The lay person on the street, where you were saying things like just when we go and borrow, we have a better chance of getting a lower interest rate if we know more about how economics works, and we don't have to have a degree in it. You could be able to teach somebody like me.
Yeah, I mean, just being basically, of course, have a base level of financial literacy gives you a whole bunch of advantages. Number one, you have a higher amount of savings for retirement. You have more long-term assets that basically are going to last you for the longer term, and you actually, like you said, pay a lower interest rate. Why is that? Because you understand how the system works. You won't be caught up by deals that look attractive on the surface of it, but when you work through them, cost you a huge, penalty in the end.
Just to give you a very practical example, I remember when I bought my first property, and I walked into the office, into the bank office, and I was having the first discussion with them about my interest rates and the different accounts that I had. I didn't know a thing. And had it not been for my husband, who knows a little bit about property, had his own property, had been paying off his property, I would have paid thousands more on the loan that I had. And just because he knew a bit more and was able to advise me, I was able to make better decisions at that time. So I would imagine that's the kind of thing you're talking about.
Yes, and it just doesn't, property, purchasing a car, buying an investment. I mean, the RAs that most people get into, they don't understand the risk profile of the RA versus the return that they're getting.
And an RA is a retirement annuity.
For instance, I mean, I know people that are investing primarily in bonds and cash for retirement. That makes no sense at all. Over a 1 or 2 year period, bonds and cash are very low risk. Over the longer term, they're not. Why? Because they're always being killed by inflation. They're a guaranteed loss maker. Cash is a guaranteed loss maker in the longer term. Why? Because inflation is going to beat it consistently year after year after year. But over a 20-year or 30-year period, the stock market, which is very risky in the short term, is incredibly low risk in the long term.
I think when we talk about stock market, though, Viv, I don't really want to get into the financial markets, but when we talk about stock market, I think a lot of people are still very terrified because of the very recent crashes that we've had.
Yeah, and people are thinking that's something unusual that happens once in a lifetime. It doesn't. The crash that we had in 2008 was similar to the crash we had in 2002, similar to the crash we had in 97. In each case, we lost 40% of the market. But had you been investing from 1994 till this year, 20 years of democracy, had you put 100,000 rands away back then, you'd be worth 1.5 million right now. That's with all these crashes in between. In the short term, you have these ups and downs in the stock market, but in the longer term, it is one of the few places you can invest your money that's going to give you real returns, that's going to give you real performance and a real chance, let me say, of actually achieving a secure financial future.
Okay, so people come to you and they're saying, you could help them learn a lot of these things that you do teach. For you, from the end of, you the guy that there was a time when you were trading, to taking all of that experience that you've had and now deciding that you want to educate people instead. That's quite a shift. Why?
Well, look, if you trade for an individual, you can help one individual. You can make them a bit of money in the short term. But that money is just a source of income. It's a source of income, for instance, just like they have a source of income when they can do a job or have a promotion, etc., etc. What they do with that income is very important. I mean, there's three things you can do with your income. You can save it, you can spend it, and you can invest it. Saving is good. Saving is good for the short term, but you must not save when you should be investing. Investment is what the real return in the future is going to be. And by the things that I'm doing with regards to education, I can help many, many more people. For a few hours of my time, their lives could significantly be better, and their retirements could be significantly better and more secure. And it doesn't require, like I said, a lot of information. We're talking about just a few things that they need to know to understand how these things work, to understand how the system works, and therefore they'll be able to actually steer their income into the profit channels. They'll know how much to save, how much to invest, and actually how to plan for what they need for retirement.
Are you seeing light bulbs coming on?
Yes, you are. For instance, a simple concept, like you mentioned compound interest, but also risk. Risk is something that people don't intuitively understand. And when you mention to them what risk is and how it works and how you must balance it off in terms of your performance here, risk is effectively the cost of your return. And people don't understand how risk and return gets mixed up. I remember a recent case, Bernie Madoff, where he basically took thousands of people for billions of dollars worth of, it was in a scam, effectively. It was called a Ponzi scheme. And those individuals, and we're talking about some really famous people like Steven Spielberg and Kevin Bacon, famous actors, multi-millionaires. These people had worked hard their entire lives. They were professionals that made a lot of money, but they didn't understand how the financial system worked. And that's how a scamster like that was able to come in and take money away from people who otherwise were very intelligent, very skilled, but just not in the financial sector.
I want to talk about you were saying to me that you would like to see some kind of a change in the economy, and what you're doing, you believe, has got the potential to do that. I mean, not just you, I'm sure if other people did it as well. But what is that change?
Well, look, I think South Africans, especially as they get towards retirement, they are far too insecure. Like the stats I mentioned to you, 12% of people that actually are saving for retirement will be in a situation where they will be able to maintain their lifestyle at the most conservative estimate. That is something that I think is very, very bad. I mean, we're talking about the vast majority of people, almost everybody, is going to have a very poor retirement in the current situation. That's something I can help with. Also, I think that in South Africa, we have a large informal sector where individuals are working, they have their own businesses, but they don't think of themselves as business people. You find somebody selling something at the corner of a street, having a little tuck shop, having a little takeaway. They don't think of themselves as business people. If someone came to them and offered them a nice, secure government job, they would jump out in a heartbeat. Even if it was being a tea lady or being a clerk or something, they don't think of themselves as being at the pinnacle of the economic system, which they are. Entrepreneurs are at the pinnacle of the system. They think of themselves as being at the bottom and trying to get into what they think is a high level, be it a government job or a job at a secure corporation. That is not the way it should be. If they have the entrepreneurial spirit, they should be able to understand how their business functions, identify where their profit centers are, and there's no reason that you couldn't grow up a small business into a much larger business and become a source of employment yourself, as opposed to being somebody that's doing something until they can find a proper job.
Is that possible? Viv? Because one of the things, and you've said this as well, is that you'll find that a person who is in that position, some of them have not had that backing when it comes to education. So would you still be able to teach them things that would help their business grow, be able to be more financially independent, even if they haven't had all this academic background?
Yeah, look, I think some of the stuff that we do in academia is overkill in terms of like the education you get. For instance, you do a BCom degree, they'll teach you about the financial system from way back in history. They'll teach you about accounting techniques for multinational corporations. They'll teach you about law that you will never encounter in your particular field. When it comes to your particular business, let's just say you have a small plumbing business. You need to understand how that business functions. So you need to be able to actually record your cash flows, understand which cash flows are going through where, be able to understand what the growth rates of your business are, what your needs are going to be going forward, what your free cash flow needs to be, what the risk in your business is in terms of economic downturns, etc. These things are things that apply to you that you can learn in a reasonably short period of time. Trust me, it's much harder to be a good plumber than it is to know the ways to run a plumbing business. It's much harder to be a good hairdresser than he knows the techniques to run that hairdressing business in the proper way. You just need a few fundamentals. That's all you would need to actually get your business to the next level.
Viv, one of the things I wanted us to talk about in this conversation was just, you were talking about knowing about your money, investments, saving, and all of that, but also something that really impacts people's lives, whether it's an entrepreneur and it just stops you that you cannot go forward, or you would like to move into another job and you can't do that, is people being blacklisted, being garnished, and that is something that weighs heavily, and a lot of people in this country go through that. So you were just talking about just having financial knowledge would empower people, that they wouldn't necessarily have to find themselves in those predicaments.
Yeah, I mean, in this country especially, I mean, one knows about Marikana and about the situation there. And one of the primary drivers for that crisis was the fact that garnishee orders were being abused. Where people's, what effectively happened was they would take a loan and then someone would come with a court-stamped certificate for their employer and say, you need to give us a certain portion of this person's salary every month because he owes us money. And that's something that has been abused, greatly in this country. And there's a number of other different aspects with regards to that. So, I mean, in South Africa, we have great laws, especially laws that protect the consumer. Unfortunately, sometimes businesses, either through lack of knowledge or the belief that they will not be, checked out, often, contravene those laws. And I think a consumer that's aware of their rights is far, far more likely to actually be able to, set aside these orders or, get their proper treatment, as opposed to someone that just will accept whatever the business tells them. And this is a very important aspect of what we're doing as well. Consumer rights education is essential.
One of the things that I'm thinking, Viv, though, is that, I mean, I know we a lot of the time we want to put the responsibility on government, we want to put the responsibility on big business, but I would imagine that even any institution would benefit from their employees knowing about their rights. Because if you're so weighed down by all of these things that are happening, if they're coming to your job and threatening you, and if they're calling you and you're sitting on the phone worrying, trying to sort out all of these accounts instead of working, that would affect your productivity as a person. So I'm just thinking that this is something that would be important for organizations to be able to empower the people that work with them and work for them to have this kind of knowledge.
Yes. I mean, I'm working on a particular thing in the mining sector at the moment with regards to education, especially, to miners who to a certain extent have been abused, especially badly by some of these, let us say, these less than ethical business people. And I do believe that's true. If you can get education if you can make your employees healthier, they'll have less sick days. They'll come to work healthier, they'll be able to work better. Okay, if your employees had a better financial health, in addition to that, they would also work better because, like you mentioned, they would not have that additional stress in their minds. They would not have to take extra days off and worry about these extra burdens on their psyche. At the same time, they would effectively feel a greater benefit from the wages that you're paying them. Often you'd find, like especially in the mining sector, you'd find that miners are saying, I'm only getting a certain amount of salary coming through me every month. But that is after they've been garnished. That's after all these deductions have been taken out. Had these miners been aware, or someone had been fighting in their corner, basically looking at every single of these deductions, saying, why is it here? Is it right? Is it correct? Etc. You would effectively find a real increase in their wages without anything else happening from the company side of point of view. So I don't understand why companies, to a large extent, don't provide this kind of service to their employees. I know there are HR divisions out there, and this should be, I think, a key part of the HR training, how to support the employees and to advise them, beyond just looking at covering the company's side in terms of any kind of labor dispute, but also looking at how do you make your labor happier. A happier labor force will make the company more profitable in the long run.
One of the things that I know that you feel very strongly about is education, and now we're talking about academic education overall in the country. And it's something that concerns a lot of people because of the state of education and where it's at right now. But what was interesting to me is you were saying that in some countries you have teachers that have got masters and PhDs, and here they are teaching primary school or high school, and you say that is something that would appeal to even you.
Yes, I mean, I think at the moment in the educational circles, the country that is held up to be the pinnacle of educational achievement, or the country that everyone thinks has gotten it right, is Finland. Finland basically had, over the last several years, they've come out with a new system. What they've done is they've made teaching a profession. So, I mean, I was just discussing with you, with your children. I said, when your kids come at the end of school and come to you and say, I want to become a teacher, you might say, yeah, not a teacher, maybe a principal, or maybe, start your own business.
Because we look down on that kind of career.
And in a way you do, that's true. I mean, I remember I was in school, possibly due to the effects of apartheid, etc. Some of the people that were teaching me back then were brilliant. I mean, we're talking about people with multiple degrees. I remember my maths teacher in high school had 3 degrees, one towards a degree in education, one a degree in mathematics, and one a postgraduate degree in mathematics. Now, normally in this environment, if you'd seen a person like that come and tell you that he's a high school teacher, you'd say you're wasting your time. You should be go into the financial markets or go and do something in corporate culture that will earn you a much higher salary, blah, blah, blah. But that teacher benefited me and all the students that went through his particular class, over the decades, let me say. The impact that he's had on the economy has been massive. And I think that's something that we should look in this country as well. I mean, the impact of a well-trained primary school teacher is incredibly high. I mean, there's some studies in the US where they say having a great, kindergarten teacher, which is a preschool teacher, versus having a bad preschool teacher, the impact in terms of that child's lifelong earnings can be as great as $300,000 or $400,000. Okay, just this one teacher in 1 year. Can you imagine the impact of having very well trained, very highly regarded teachers all the way through your schooling system? And that is something I think that we have to focus about more in this country. Make teaching more of a profession that's respected, and have the standards for teachers increased, and therefore reward them accordingly as well.
You say to me it's for you, and you're, I would say you're a teacher, but you say that one of the most fundamental things that a teacher must have is the absolute belief and conviction that a child who is really, really bright, that's just genetically that's just the way they are, and a person who is not as gifted, that those kids have pretty much, if you treat them in a certain way, they could achieve pretty much the same kind of results.
Yeah, I think there is a real cultural difference. I think because they found it's a Western versus Eastern philosophy. In the Western world, people often focus on talent. In the Eastern world, people often focus on your effort. And I think that if you look at studies that have been coming out that very clearly state that even the best artists, the best designers, the best electricians, the best whatever the field is, the most high, Tiger Woods, for instance, or Rafael Nadal, or those kind of individuals, or Vanessa Mae, the violinist, they all required approximately 10,000 hours of work to get to where they are. They weren't just gifted. They didn't give Tiger Woods a stick and just say, go ahead it. And if you put 10,000 hours of work, you may not become Tiger Woods, but you become a very, very good golfer. If you focus on the effort that the child puts in as opposed to just the innate talent, you'll find that the child is often likely to achieve things that you never thought it was being possible. And I think the one thing that we have to consider, there's a recent study, and I think Warren Buffett says the same thing. Any IQ points you have above 130 are wasted. It's all about hard work after a certain point. And majority of children have the ability to do most things. It may be easier for some children to get to that point, but the other children that work a bit harder, maybe that hard work will benefit them later in life. When the child that finds things easy initially doesn't have that discipline, when they encounter something that's really difficult, they may just say, okay, it's not for me, it's too difficult. The child that works hard may actually find it easier later on in life because it actually gives them that discipline to work through things. An example I'll give you is when I was at university and I saw this study. Those that did accounting in high school did very well in the first year, did okay in the second year. But in the third year, they were actually being beaten by those that had not done accounting in high school. Why is that? Because in the first year of university, you would just rely on what you'd done in the past, and therefore it was all easy for you. And you got into a pattern of just relying on your innate gift or your innate knowledge. You didn't work through the problems really hard. But the person that encountered it for the first time at university, they were struggling from the start and they had to work through it really hard. So they worked through hard in first year, they worked hard in second year, they worked hard in third year. And by the third year, the person that had the innate gift or the innate knowledge, they weren't able to basically rely on it anymore. They had to do some hard work, but their techniques had been falling behind. And therefore, you find that grit matters more the more in depth you go to any particular field.
I always ask people this, so we've run out of time, but I can't let you go without saying, giving you the opportunity to share with us. If I haven't asked you something and you're like, Hannah, I really want to say this before I go.
Yeah. Look, I mean, with regards to what I'm trying to do right now, I do think that, sometimes a mistake is put around certain things. Like you said, people are scared about the idea of the stock market or scared about the idea of numbers. But these aren't incredibly difficult concepts. I can understand there are some incredibly difficult concepts out there in the world, but finance doesn't have any of these things. There is, sometimes the jargon that people use that may be confusing to lay individuals, but the concepts behind the jargon aren't that difficult. I mean, as hard as it is to say, we financial people aren't rocket scientists. You're not going to encounter something really difficult in finance. It may take a bit of time, but these concepts can be understood by just about anybody, and they will benefit just about anybody. Most people will encounter physics or biology in high school. How often are you going to have to look at the reproductive system of a plant or look at, the mass of electron in real life? But just about everybody will work in the current economic environment that we live in right now. Understanding the basics of that, I think, is far more beneficial than looking at, for instance, what the conductivity of copper is, etc.
Thank you so much for joining us, Viv. It is an absolute pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me.